evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, February 28th. We begin tonight with a significant update on negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine. In the lead up to the meeting to discuss U.S. support, Ukraine's president clashed with both President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influenced.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
Vice President Vance then accused Mr. Zelensky of being ungrateful and trying to litigate disagreements in front of the press.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
answer? Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again, just say thank you.
I said a lot of times to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong.
Donald Trump then accused Zelensky of refusing a ceasefire deal, citing that previous agreements were made with former President Joe Biden.
You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden who was not a smart person.
Mr. Trump posted on social media that Mr. Zelensky disrespected the Oval Office and that he can come back when he is, quote, ready for peace. Canada is extending its temporary visa application window by 1 year for Ukrainians fleeing Russia's invasion. The new deadline to apply for new or renewed work and study permits under the Canada-Ukraine Authorization for Emergency Travel Programs is March 31st of next year. The Immigration Department says it continues to evaluate how its programs can best support Ukrainians affected by Russia's invasion. Nearly 300,000 Ukrainians came to Canada under the program. At least one international affairs expert suggests Canada may have had a hard time taking part in peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. Canadian Global Affairs Institute President David Perry says Canada would have had a hard time proving its peacekeepers were impartial, given its vocal support for Ukraine during Russia's invasion. This comes after Justin Trudeau said that he would rule out sending troops as part of a potential peace deal with Russia. The UN's principles for peacekeeping state that nations sending peacekeepers must be impartial. In an interview with the UK outlet The Spectator, President Donald Trump said that Pierre Poilievre's biggest problem is that he's, quote, not a MAGA guy, and that he hasn't said nice things about the president.
The Conservatives obviously have taken a hit in the polls since some of the comments that you've made that the Liberals have leaned into. Do you think that they're still going to be able to pull it out up there?
Well, I think his biggest problem is he's not a MAGA guy, you know? I mean, he's really not. He's not a Trump guy at all.
Yeah. He's more of a throwback Republican.
He's different.
Yeah.
Making a big mistake. They all make that mistake. You know, they think they're going to be the tough guy and they're going to knock out Trump.
Yeah.
And they end up getting the hell beat out of him. So I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you, Pierre. I just don't know. I don't like what he's saying about me. It's just not positive about me, and we've done a great job.
Mr. Trump also called Chrystia Freeland terrible and incompetent and took credit for her being removed as Minister of Finance.
These other left-of-center politicians, Chrystia Freeland up in Canada was doing a debate. You know, she's trying to lead the Liberal Party up there now into this election, and she said that there needs to be a nuclear alliance with other European nations and Japan against the United States because you're predatory.
She's terrible. I'll tell you what, I know her very well, and
I'm sorry.
I know her very well. She's absolutely terrible for the country. She's incompetent in many respects and can only cause ill will for Canada. In fact, Governor Trudeau understood that. I call him Governor Trudeau understood that, and he actually fired her.
Yes. Because
of a meeting he had with me. I said she is so bad. She's bad for the country. You know, if she were talented, I know people that are sort of bad people, but they do a good job running a country. Who seems to be? Who's going to get the nomination? Do you think?
I don't know. After that debate, they all seemed. She was the nuttiest, but they all seemed pretty nutty to me.
She's a whack.
Liberal leadership frontrunner Mark Carney is facing criticism again over the comments he made about his role in helping former Prime Minister Paul Martin. In the leadership debate, he implied that he helped the Martin government balance the books.
Well, it was my privilege to work with Paul Martin when he balanced the books and kept the books balanced. And one of the lessons of that is the need for government to continue to focus on how effectively it is spending precious taxpayers' dollars.
But according to the Conservatives, the timeline doesn't add up. And Conservative MP Michael Barrett accused Mr. Carney of refusing to take questions from the press.
And it's interesting. And I wonder if any of you take it personally that he refuses to meet with the press gallery. He refuses to come to Parliament Hill and have a conversation with you. But this lie raises questions about his other claims. One of them is that he helped Finance Minister Paul Martin balance the budget in the 90s. Now, I don't know the answer, but it's been pointed out to me that the budget was balanced in 1998, and Mark Carney wasn't in the country at the time. He became a federal bureaucrat in 2004, several years later. So that timeline doesn't add up. He needs to come before Canadians, come before the media, and answer questions about that discrepancy. Is it another lie? because that seems to be the pattern of what Mark Carney has offered. I have another quote, this one from Blacklock's reporter. Carney yesterday also would not reply to questions over his claim that he personally helped then Finance Minister Paul Martin balance the federal budget in 1998, end quote. So just like his lies about his role and his full support for the decision of Brookfield to move Canadian jobs to the United States, he needs to address this claim.
All right, stay tuned. We'll be turning to the results of the Ontario provincial election when we come back and how Doug Ford managed to pull it off again. We'll have that story and more news right after the break. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has cruised to a third straight majority government. His Progressive Conservatives were declared re-elected just minutes after most polls in the province closed.
Wow, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Boy, what a crowd. Thank you so much, and what a night, and what a result. Thank you so much. Together we have made history. Together we have secured a strong, historic third majority mandate. A mandate to protect Ontario from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for being here, for sharing this incredible moment with me. Democracy only works if people are willing to step up and step forward. Our province is stronger because of your decision to do so, so I want to thank all the candidates. During my time in office, I hope I've proven I will work with anyone, I will work with everyone to get things done.
The NDP formed the official opposition again, but with a reduced seat count. NDP leader Marit Stiles said the results aren't everything we hoped for, but that the people of Ontario made their choice.
Look, we set out in this election to form a government on your side. Now, the results aren't everything that we hoped for, but the people of Ontario made their choice. They've re-elected the government, hoping it will help protect them from Donald Trump and his tariffs, and they've entrusted me and my team to do a different, but also very important job. Our job is to hold this government to account. And that is the job that we are going to do with our usual fight and our determination, but also with love and hope and optimism.
Although Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie lost her riding, during her address to supporters, she celebrated the fact that the Liberal Party is back to official party status.
Listen, running for office is no small thing. So no matter who you ran for, or our province and our democracy are better because of the hard work, right? So thank you. I know tonight isn't exactly the result we were looking for, but you should be very, very proud of what we did tonight. People counted us out. They said the Ontario Liberal Party was dead. Tonight, you prove them wrong. The Ontario Liberal Party is back to official party status, and that's a big milestone. But it gets better. We increased our share of the votes substantially to 30%.
We're going to bring in Dr. Lydia Miljohn, professor and head of the Political Science Department at the University of Windsor. Dr. Miljohn, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, Teresa.
Now, Doug Ford called this snap election well in advance of when the original election was originally scheduled. Many commented on how it was a big gamble on his part, but what do you think were the keys for him to secure another majority government, something that hasn't been done since the 1950s?
Well, he was able to seize the time, seize the opportunity. I mean, it was pretty clear that he had been planning this quite some time. I remember fielding calls about this back in the fall, and the fact remains there were those checks in the mail just as the writ was being dropped. But I think he really took the opportunity of the moment, which was the threats from Donald Trump and the tariffs, and he really was able to capture the imagination of Ontarians. Because if you recall, when this all sort of unfolded in early January, he was actually one of the few people on the national stage really setting out the agenda for Canada. And so he was able to capitalize on that at a time when the federal government was weakened with their own leadership problems.
Well, as you just highlighted, Premier Ford was a huge advocate for the Team Canada approach when it came to Donald Trump's tariff threats, both in Canada but also with U.S. media. How much do you think that actually played a role, not only with voters, but also kind of making the other party leaders have a hard time campaigning against that?
It's true. I mean, really, if you think about just what we've been captivated by for the last month, it's all been about the tariffs and how to respond to them. And even to insofar as as much as the opposition parties really tried to attack him on his record, things like the Green Belt or broken promises with respect to healthcare, that wasn't top of mind. When he's going to Washington, D.C. during an Ontario election campaign, that becomes the headline. And so that really focuses people's attention on that. And so, yeah, it was especially difficult for Merritt Stiles, Bonnie Crombie, Mike Schreiner to get anything into the news media and to get their voices heard. They got a little bit during the debates, but that certainly wasn't enough to change people's overall impression about the government.
Now, we know that Ontario hasn't had three straight majority governments since 1959. Why is this the case?
Well, I think in Canada, we like to vote out governments, and typically a government has a couple terms of office. That's sort of the normal thing. 10 years, 8 to 10 years seems to be a normal course of events, and we get kind of tired of them, and then we want to try something new. So this is unusual. It's not that we haven't had consecutive governments, though, right? If you think about Dalton McGuinty, he won two majorities, then a minority, and then when Kathleen Wynne came in, she won another majority. So we've had, other governments that have actually lasted longer. This is just unusual that he isn't being delayed with a minority government. That he actually has a pretty strong majority, not as big as he'd like, but certainly it's an impressive victory.
Both the NDP and Liberals attempted to make healthcare a major issue while campaigning. Why do you think they failed to make progress on this issue?
I think it's just such a thorny issue. It's not as if it was a problem that just happened over the last 6 years during Doug Ford's mandate. I mean, he obviously famously started his initial foray into politics saying he was going to end hallway medicine. That means that there was a problem before that. It was a problem that the NDP, when they're in government, couldn't fix. The Liberals couldn't fix it. So I don't know if Ontarians have a high expectation that anyone's going to solve the problem. Everybody talks about it, but we don't really see any real movement on the policy front. They all have said they're going to invest more, but that's not really solving the problem. We really have to rethink how healthcare is delivered, and nobody wants to have that conversation. And so I think that's why it just doesn't become an issue that people can say, oh, I can see the difference between all the different parties when they're all basically promising to do something.
Now, obviously, Doug Ford won, but there's a lot of talk about whether or not the election can actually be considered a success for the NDP and the Liberals. Now, for the NDP, they kept their position as official opposition. Should that be considered a win for that party?
Not really. They lost some seats. I think what's remarkable about the NDP victory is that their popular support was lower than that of the Liberals, yet they were much more effective at getting people out to vote where it mattered. And so their conversion rate was really high. And I think that's a real success story for them. But I don't think they can rest on their laurels. I mean, the fact remains they lost popular support and they did lose some seats. And certainly the Liberals can claim some victory insofar as that they, as Bonnie Crombie pointed out, they're over 30% now. They're no longer in the doldrums, not having official party status. So they've built something of the party, but they've got a long way to go. They've really got to regroup and rebuild their at the base level, their constituency associations. They didn't have a full slate of candidates at the start of the campaign. And even at the end of the day, there were candidates that dropped out, and that really benefited the other parties.
Well, Bonnie Crombie has highlighted that she intends to remain as Liberal leader despite losing her seat. How likely is it that the party is going to keep her as a leader? You did just kind of mention that they do need to go under construction. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think if she positions herself as someone who's able to rebuild the grassroots, she might have another shot at this. It is difficult when you don't have a seat yourself, but I think they're in that stage where, considering that they're not official opposition, her lack of her absence at the legislature, I don't think is going to be missed. I think her strong suit is fundraising, is building up the grassroots, and I don't know if the Liberals have a big appetite for yet another leadership race. They just elected her a short time ago. There's the federal leadership race going on for the Liberals as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of voter fatigue for that kind of thing, and so that might give her a chance to make the case why she should stay on. And lots of things happen in politics. 4 years is a long mandate, and certainly there will be by-elections that she can try for again. And I think that might be the bigger test for her.
And if we take a look at the Green Party, they kept their 2 seats but failed to get a third. For Green supporters, should this election be seen as a success?
I don't think so. I mean, they really didn't make any headway. Holding to 2 seats. It doesn't matter if Schreiner calls himself the the unofficial official opposition. 2 seats is a poor showing. Considering that people are very concerned to the environment, I think it's very difficult to be a party that has that sort of single focus. As much as he talks about other issues and holding the government to account, I think just the association as a Green Party seems to be a non-starter in Canada.
Well, Dr. Miljohn, thank you so much for the time today.
My pleasure, Teresa.
All right, don't go anywhere. Up next, we'll have more of today's top national and international headlines. Canada's GDP grew 2.6% in the fourth quarter from 2024. Wayne Gretzky continues to face criticism for being a supporter of Donald Trump. And then we'll have our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Stay with us. Canadian police have arrested hundreds and seized illegal drugs, cash, firearms, and stolen vehicles in a national sprint targeting fentanyl and synthetic opioids. According to the RCMP, the operation, which included law enforcement agencies across the country, resulted in 524 arrests and seizures of about 46 kilograms of fentanyl and more than 15,000 pills of fentanyl and other synthetic opioids from December 9th to January 18th. Member of Parliament Kevin Vuong joined us earlier on the significance of the seizure.
I don't think it's a coincidence that we've magically all of a sudden had a whole lot more seizures and arrests related to fentanyl. This in itself, the fact that there are 524 arrests in this latest bust is a clear indication that not only is there a problem, it's a really big problem. How often do Canadians hear of multiple people being arrested, and never mind hundreds, 524 arrested. Now, the seizure included 46 kilograms of fentanyl, and 46 kilograms may not seem like a lot, but when you put it in context, that all you need are 2 milligrams that could be a lethal dose to kill someone. Well, there are 1 million milligrams in 1 kilogram. So what was seized was the equivalent of fentanyl that could kill 23 million Canadians, over half of the country. And so there is most definitely a very big problem. And I wish it did not take a foreign government to force ours to act, because this is a problem that should have already been a priority for any government, but most definitely for ours, because fentanyl is something that has been killing Canadians for far too long, and it must be stopped. And that in itself, protecting Canadians should have been the first priority.
Hockey legend Wayne Gretzky's wife says it has broken his heart to read the intense criticism he faces for his support of U.S. President Donald Trump. Janet Gretzky posted on Instagram to thank hockey great Bobby Orr for defending her husband. Mr. Trump has angered many Canadians by saying Canada should become the 51st state and frequently mocking the Prime Minister, calling him Governor Justin Trudeau. Mr. Trump repeated his governor comments as he posted online, calling Wayne Gretzky the greatest Canadian. Statistics Canada says that a surge in household spending ahead of the holidays is to thank for an economic lift late in the year. The agency says the country's economy grew by 2.6% in the final quarter of 2024, results which were stronger than expected. Economists and StatCan's own early estimates showed expectations of 1.8% growth for the fourth quarter. Now it's time for our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Take it away, Dan.
Well, thank you very much, Teresa. It's, we're getting to that funny point. We're putting February behind us. March comes in. Of course, that means a lot of things on the energy front, but also means a lot of stuff on the political front, which the two may be very much connected. As I mentioned 5, 6, 7 years ago with AffordableEnergy.ca, when you start messing around with affordability on energy prices, you start to wind up with general universal unaffordability for the country. Now, the number one issue in Canada, regardless of who the pollster is. But I digress. This is an interesting week because of what's happening south of the border. Continuation of the likelihood of the tariffs being imposed on Tuesday, the 4th of March. The Canadian dollar showing some weakness. That means that the price could actually go up if prices remain stable in U.S. markets for commodities like gasoline, diesel, and for oil. And so what we've seen this week, though, has been a very calming decrease in gas prices pretty much everywhere from coast to coast. BC fell about 4 cents a liter net. Ontario fell about 3-4 cents down to the 151 range from 156. Quebec, the same thing. And of course, in some places in Atlantic Canada, they finally caught up to what we've been doing in the rest of the country. And in places like Nova Scotia, you saw gasoline prices drop 6 cents a liter today, 3 cents in Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and of course in PEI. But it does suggest that the markets are somewhat nervous again about what's happening. We're in a very different period of time where OPEC has to make a decision as to whether or not it's going to start putting back more oil in the markets. At the same time, the Trump administration has finally restored the sanctions on Venezuela. Now, Venezuela was the hope for many companies in the U.S. that they'd be able to get heavy oil, which they desperately need to make diesel. So that's because U.S. gasoline is produced with U.S. oil, but it cannot make diesel. Light, tight shale oil produced in the United States, the drill baby drill stuff that you heard about, it's great for gasoline, but you can't produce the stuff you need to run your economy, a modern economy, a transport-intensive economy. You can't do your mining, you can't do your agriculture, you can't do your aviation or your transportation matrix, whether it be by plane, train, or automobile, without diesel. And by automobile, of course, I mean light-duty trucks, etc. So what that's really means is that Canada finds itself in a very unique position in that, yes, there may be sanctions coming, but there may be tariffs coming, but it does mean that Canadian oil is highly prized and valuable. Just a side note on this, Teresa, is that one of the alternatives for the United States to get heavy oil has always been Mexico, if not Venezuela or Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not interested in selling much to the United States. It has its own markets in Asia, and they're doing very well, thank you. As I mentioned, Venezuela is a basket case. It continues to be sanctioned, and Chevron, which had a deal to get 250,000 barrels, is now finding that they won't be able to do that anymore under the Trump administration, who said no finally. And Mexican oil. Yes, well, there's a lot of oil that was coming from Mexico in the United States in exchange for natural gas. The problem is that the heavy oil that Mexico has is contaminated. A lot of water, a lot of salt in it. So it's not good stuff. It's why we've heard President Trump on the same day he says, I want to reimpose tariffs or impose tariffs on Canada, saying, hey, we should build the Keystone XL pipeline. Let's get onto it. He knows, as do American producers, that without Canadian oil, your economy will come to a halt. And by the way, the numbers prove it. The United States produces 13 million barrels a day. That's up from 5 million barrels 15 years ago. But they consume 21 million barrels a day. So anyway you slice it, they're short. They'd just like to get a lot more Canadian oil. It'd be great if we went from 4 million to 8 million barrels a day if we had the pipeline capacity, not just the United States, but to around the world. You can imagine what that would do in terms of revenues to the federal provincial government. It would double those revenues and, of course, leave the Americans in a situation where they would have no alternative but to go for Canadian energy. And, of course, I also have to be mindful of what happened last week, Teresa. We saw the United States and Japan come to a conclusion idea based on LNG. $1 trillion. Now, why do I say it slowly? Because Canada had 17, 18 LNG projects with all the natural gas we have, could have been supplying the Japans of this world, the Germanys, the South Koreas, you name it. But we decided that there was no business case. And that we blocked pipelines by a group of lost climate fanatics who basically hogtied Canada's resources. In the meantime, the United States now has a $1 trillion potential bonanza deal. And by the way, here's the kicker. They buy it from us for $3 an MMBTU. That's the variation. And they sell it to Japan, to Europe, or wherever for $15 to $18. So in other words, Canada, yeah, you can supply the raw material, but don't worry about the higher value added. We'll look after the United States because your government, your Liberals, your New Democrats, your Bloc, and your Greens have blocked Canadian energy because we believe that a molecule called CO2 is somehow going to bring the world to an end, especially if it's being produced in Canada. By the way, it's plant food. It's not a pollutant. And any politician that tells you that is fundamentally dishonest. Anybody who calls themselves a scientist making that claim should never be called a scientist. They should be called false scientists. These are not people who understand the science, the breakdown of molecules, and its importance in terms of society. I digress. On the question of energy, Canada has a big role to play, an even bigger role to play if government that came into power were to prepare itself to allow our energy products to get to all markets in the world, not just the United States. And I think that's where we're going. You want to do something to help Canadians right now, Teresa? The biggest thing we could do, get more Canadian oil and gas sold to the rest of the world. Canadian dollar would strengthen, and you and I would be saving 26 cents a liter. Get rid of the carbon tax. That's only one thing. Another savings of 20 cents a liter. Get rid of the second carbon tax. You'd save another 4 or 5 cents a liter in British Columbia, another 20 cents a liter. Imagine a situation where diesel, gasoline, all of our input costs to move goods in this country were to drop by 50 or 60 cents a liter. That's exactly the difference between what we're seeing in terms of where Canada ought to be going and what the Liberals under Mark Carney or whoever, the NDP and the Greens want to continue to impose on Canadians. And then they wonder why there's an affordability crisis. It all comes back to energy. And when you start fooling around with policies that no other country would dare, those that have done so, Germany and Britain, are in absolute economic decline. Energy costs have gone way too high for most people. Manufacturing is leaving, and with it, economic activity. So it's pretty clear to me that when you have a policy in this country that has been proven to be ultimately wrong, not just as it's imposed on Canadians, but as it's been unfolding in places like Germany, in places like Britain. And the reason why, of course, the United States has rejected this is very simple. They're not prepared to impose and punish their consumers in the way Canadians have allowed their government to do so. A government, by the way, which lacks complete legitimacy. So I'd say, in the next week or so, let's watch for energy prices to stabilize next week and start to move back up as we head towards April 1st. I know it's not that far away, a month away. We're going to have carbon tax, another one you voted for, 4 cents a liter, an increase in the price of 6 cents a liter for the shift over from winter to summer gasoline on April 15th. And the rest is history. Great time for an election. We'll talk to you soon, Teresa.
When we return from the break, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announces $270 million in funding for Inuit-led conservation efforts in the Arctic. Amid an outgoing measles outbreak in Ontario, the province reports 84 new cases within the last 2 weeks. Stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced a $270 million agreement for Inuit-led conservation efforts in the Arctic. He says that the deal is for jobs and conservation projects in the Kikitani region, which is a major Inuit territory that's part of Nunavut.
Well, today, we're taking another step. We're announcing the signing of the SINA project, Finance for Permanence Agreement, between the Government of Canada, the Kikitani Inuit Association, and the Pew Charitable Trusts. With this agreement, we will protect over 3.5% more of Canada's marine area by supporting Inuit-led conservation initiatives to ensure the long-term health of northern environments. In so doing, we're also building an economy based on conservation, creating jobs where Inuit knowledge will be leveraged and valued to protect northern ecosystems, and investing in community infrastructure like the Arctic Bay Small Craft Harbour. Now, when I first became Prime Minister almost 10 years ago, less than 1% of Canada's oceans were protected. We're now nearing the 17% mark, and I know everyone is going to keep working really hard to reach our goal of protecting 30% of our oceans by 2030. There's lots more work to do, and you will always be able to count on me as your ally. I was working with CPAWS to protect Canada's nature long before working in politics, and I will always, for the rest of my life, be deeply committed to protecting Canada's lands and waters.
Mr. Trudeau says the federal government is putting up $200 million, while the rest is coming from donors in Canada and elsewhere. The investment is expected to attract $318 million over 15 years to the region. Ontario is reporting 84 new measles cases over the last 2 weeks, nearly doubling the province's total count since an outbreak started in the fall. The new cases bring Ontario's total this year to 119, far surpassing the 101 total infections recorded in the province between 2013 and 2023. Almost all of the new cases are connected to an interprovincial outbreak that began in October, which also saw the virus spread in New Brunswick and Manitoba. One of the cases reported Thursday was in an unvaccinated child who acquired measles outside of Canada. Health officials have urged Canadians to get vaccinated as the best path of protection, noting that most people infected by the recent outbreak were not immunized. And on Wednesday, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a longtime critic of well-established vaccines, said that his department is tracking a measles outbreak that has infected more than 124 people and killed a child in Texas. Mr. Kennedy called the outbreak, quote, not unusual, 25 years after the disease was declared to be eliminated in the U.S.
There's a measles outbreak in Texas at the moment in which a child is reported to have died. Do you have concerns about that, and have you asked Secretary Kennedy to look into that?
Well, why don't we, Bobby, do you want to speak on that?
We are following the measles epidemic every day. I think there's 124 people who have contracted measles at this point, mainly in Kings County, Texas. Mainly, we're told, in the Mennonite community. There are 2 people who have died, but we're watching it, and there are about 20 people hospitalized, mainly for quarantine. We're watching it. We put out a post on it yesterday, and we're going to continue to follow it. Incidentally, there have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. We have measles outbreaks every year.
The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has extended a state visit invitation to President Donald Trump on behalf of King Charles. Mr. Trump accepted the invitation, which came at the start of a face-to-face meeting on Thursday between Mr. Trump and Mr. Starmer at the White House.
He's a beautiful man, a wonderful man, and we appreciate it. I've known him, gotten to know him very well, actually. Yeah. First term and now second term. Perhaps you'd like to say what that very important paragraph.
Yes, so this is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented. And I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us. So this is a very special letter. I think the last state visit was a tremendous success. His Majesty the King wants to make this even better than that. So this is truly historic, an unprecedented second state visit, and he wants to talk that through with you.
And that says at Windsor. That's
yes.
Really something.
Yes. What I haven't got yet is your answer. I do need to.
The answer is yes. On behalf of our wonderful First Lady, Melania, and myself, the answer is yes, and we look forward to being there and honoring the King and honoring really your country. Your country is a fantastic country, and it'll be our honor to be there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I shall happily take that back to His Majesty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Vatican is making alternative plans for Ash Wednesday next week as Pope Francis recovers from pneumonia. A Vatican official will officiate the March 5th ceremony and procession that begins the Church's Lenten season leading up to Easter in April. Francis is 2 weeks into his recovery from pneumonia, and doctors are cautiously optimistic. They believe he has passed the most critical stage, but are not ready to say he's completely out of danger. A new survey suggests that 28% of Canadians consider artificial intelligence systems like ChatGPT reliable sources of information. The annual CanTrust Index, published by Proof Strategies, found 41% of Generation Z Canadians, those born between 1997 and 2012, reported a high level of trust in search results from AI systems. Matt Dubé, Vice President of GetProof, joined us for more on the survey.
I think there's a few things that we observed this year, and it's one of the great things about CanTrust is we've been doing it for 10 years now, so we have some year-to-year trends, and even on AI, we can compare going back to last year in 2024 and then back to 2023. So the first big trend that we've observed with AI is there's been a fair decrease in trust overall in AI, and I think that that's something that's notable. It's something that we've seen happen over the last 2 years. I think that's partly explained by the fact that, we're hearing more about it in the news. There's more scrutiny put on some of the perhaps failings of the systems. But the flip side is that there's a lot to be, excited about and optimistic about. There's clearly a generational divide, as you mentioned. So Gen Z, the most trusting, millennials somewhere in the middle, and then obviously as you get older, baby boomers and beyond, you're looking at the lowest levels of trust in AI. So that's definitely an interesting observation as well. And one that I like to talk about that's perhaps unsurprising, but that's nevertheless notable is the trust levels from users and non-users. So if you look at, for example, we have data on trust in AI for consumer experience to improve consumer experience. Users see that have that trust level at 60 or 59, if you want to be specific. Non-users are at 12. And we see that same trend in the overall use of artificial intelligence. And so I think one of the takeaways from that is, seeing is believing, right? There's a comfort level that exists for those who have begun using the different tools and platforms, and perhaps some skepticism from those who haven't. The flip side, perhaps, that you could say there is you could wonder also how the ease with which folks get bought in. Perhaps there's not enough skepticism from existing users of AI. And that's definitely sort of the devil's advocate point that can be made when it comes to existing users. The other thing, one last point I'll just mention, and for this answer is just in terms of industry specific expectations that I thought was really interesting. So we measured trust in AI to support specific industries or sectors. So we really saw a wide range of trust levels. So I'll give you one example: retail. In 2024, the trust level was at 22. This year, it's at 39. So a big jump in a positive direction. On the flip side, it's a modest decrease, but it's a decrease nonetheless. News media reporting at trust in AI supporting that industry has gone from 32 to 29. Very modest, not looking at a huge gap there, but nevertheless, I think what that tells you is that these brick and mortar uses, like a retail experience, for example, how is it impacting your online shopping or searching for something you want to buy, versus summarizing of news alerts, right? We've seen some infamous examples recently of where that's been a problem. I think Apple ran into some trouble there where they had a news alert that didn't actually reflect what was in the story. So you're kind of seeing some shifting sands a little bit as Canadians get used to AI and how it might apply.
I'm Teresa Skubic, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on X and TikTok. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the Newsforum YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us on Forum Daily News. We'll see you next time. Good night, Canada.